New York Times bestselling authors Jayne Ann Krentz and Rachel Hawkins. For those of you tuning in virtually, we do have a limited number of signed copies of both authors' new books. If you'd like one held for you or put in the mail, give us a call or go online after the event. We'll be happy to hook you up with one of these terrific books. For those of you here in person, the format for our program is pretty basic. I have some grilling questions for Jayne and Rachel. We'll then open the floor for any questions you might have. They'll be happy to sign books afterwards. You should have a numbered ticket inside the book, and we'll go by numbers after that. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jayne and Rachel. My first question for both of you, and we'll start with you, Rachel, is who was Rachel before you became a published author?
Rachel was many things, beginning with a really weird little kid, which I believe is the origin story of many a writer. But yeah, I was actually a high school English teacher for 3 years before I realized that that's very hard. I don't know if you guys know, but teaching, it is not for the weak, and it turned out I was a little weak. But while I was teaching, I got into reading a lot of YA books because I was trying to keep up with what my kids were reading. And that led me to deciding to write a YA book. I had always loved to make up stories. I love to read, but it wasn't until that I kind of was like, well, maybe it's time to give it a go myself. And that led to my first book, Hex Hall, and then I was a published author. So I've been doing this since 2010 now, which I feel very blessed to still be here.
Jayne, what about you?
I had a similar story, including the fact that I was not a high school English teacher, but I was a school librarian, and it only took me 1 year to figure out that this was harder than I could do, and that was the end of my career as a school librarian, and I'm sure many children who don't know me should be grateful. But other than that, it was that same kind of wandering around that you do, I think, before you become a writer. It's like you fall into it somehow. Because everybody will tell you up front there's no money in it, so don't even bother to think about it as a career. And, of course, we think about it careers first. You know, we got to pay the rent. And being a writer sometimes does not pay the rent. So that's why you end up falling into it.
I think it's fair to say that neither of you were an overnight success when it came to getting your first book published. Tell us about what that process was like. We'll start with you, Jayne.
Okay, well, let's get into the time machine here. This is before it was possible to do self-published. That was not even on the horizon or possibility. So it was New York or nothing. And in those days, the New York market for romantic suspense, which is what I have always written, was pretty zilch. And it took me 6 years to find a publisher. And I think it was just a question of standing on the right street corner until the bus went by. And also at some point in that hazy period, at some point, New York Publishing discovered that romantic suspense, and women's fiction in general does sell. And so a lot of this was just timing, I think, for me. And I think that's probably the way it is for everything in life, actually. Right timing.
Yeah, exactly. I always like to say that, too, like what's meant for you doesn't pass you by. And that absolutely was the case for me. So when I was busy being a teacher, the part of the story I left out of that is that it's very boring, so I don't get really into it. But like my job got really tangled up in like bureaucratic red tape. Again, I'm not sure if you also know that there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape in public education in this country. So basically I was on an emergency certificate, and so I was going to grad school to try to get my teaching certificate. And all of that was getting messed up because the state was changing their regulations for what that should look like, and the school I was going to was changing there. And so I was going to lose my job as a teacher anyway, almost certainly, because I wasn't going to have my teaching certificate in time. And then that's when I decided, like, I'm just going to write a book, which again is insane. But maybe you have to be a little insane to do this thing in the first place. You have to be a little bold. And so, yeah, so I sat down. My husband cashed out his state retirement because he was also a teacher. And I stayed home for like 3 months and I wrote my first book, which turned out to be the first book that sold for me, Hex Hall. And yeah, it was just like once I actually like really committed to it, it went really fast. But I always say I was incredibly lucky, but I had also put myself in a position where luck could happen to me. By which I mean when I knew that like it was do this or die basically. I really like looked up. That was like around the time like 2008 or so when like author blogs and agent blogs were really popular. So I was reading a lot of those and I was just got really serious about like, okay, how do you get an agent? How do you get published? And like Jayne, I wanted New York traditional publishing. That was the way I wanted to go at that time. And so yeah, it just sort of went from there. Yeah.
Let's talk about the book that brought you here today, your new book. We'll start with you, Rachel. What can you tease us about The Storm?
So, The Storm is the story of several very complicated women in a small Alabama coastal beach town. Part of my reason for writing this book was to spread propaganda to remind people that Alabama has beaches. A thing that no one ever knows, even though if you look at a map, you can very clearly see we are on the Gulf Coast. But my husband grew up very close to the Alabama Gulf Coast. I grew up going to the beach a lot. I was on the other side of the state near Florida. And I just wanted to set something in that world. And so St. Medard's Bay is my sort of fictional tribute to places like Gulf Shores and Orange Beach. In St. Medard's Bay, there is a famous hotel, the Rosalie Inn, which is one of the few buildings that has still been standing after 100 years, despite a series of deadly hurricanes that have hit the town. And one of the most famous hurricanes occurred in 1984, and it was famous because during that hurricane, a young St. Medard's Bay young woman named Lo Bailey was accused of having murdered her married lover, who just happened to be the son of the governor of Alabama. Although that was a mistrial, she has come back to town all these years later to tell the true story of what happened that summer. And in doing so, gets involved with the current owner of the Rosalie Inn, Geneva Corliss, who may have some secrets that are also connected to Lo's past. So it's a lot going on. We've got deadly hurricanes, we've got juicy secrets, murderous ladies, all my favorite things.
Jayne, top that.
I would just like to point out there's a dog in my book.
She's got me there. She's got me there.
So everything else is sort of small potatoes after that. This is psychic romantic suspense. It often gets labeled paranormal, which is technically correct, but those of us who read widely in women's fiction and romantasy and romance genre and romantic suspense know that for us, paranormal has come to stand for the supernatural. Werewolves, vampires. I'm not doing that. Witches. I love to read them, but I don't write them. And I just want to clarify, public service announcement, if that's what you're looking for, there's no werewolves. But I do like the psychic vibe, and I lean on that quite heavily. And plot-wise, that has proven very easy because when I open the cupboard doors, plots just fall out due to the fact that our government and the Russians and the UK spent billions back in the 20th century exploring the psychic thing. You're all trying to create psychic spies, psychic weapons, psychic drugs to control people. It was, we will never know how much money went down that little rat hole. Anyhow, it left behind lots of plot ideas. I swear you can't make this stuff up. So in this particular case, we have two characters, our hero and heroine, from low-scale feuding families. Okay, they're not picking up guns or anything. It's not that kind of mafia feud. But these two families have been not trusting each other for 4 generations. However, 4 generations back, their great-grandfathers agreed to a pact that even though they hated each other's guts because they'd fallen apart in business together, whatever came, they would protect the secret that the families created during this experiment, during one of these clandestine experiments, which must not fall into the wrong hands. Except it has. And so So these two characters from these two different families are forced to work together to recover the secret and save the aunt and uncle they had no clue were sleeping together. Apparently the families had not always been feuding. And the dog.
Very important.
And there's a crazy art colony. Oh, I almost forgot the best part. It's set in the Sedona Red Rock area.
It's been a while since you've come back to Arizona, hasn't it? In your books.
Yeah, I love Arizona, but I haven't used it that much recently. I think I've been too much in Seattle, the other area.
I think a lot of readers envision writers of fiction as being able to make up everything, but you also have to do some research for your books. Can you talk a little bit about that? We'll start with you, Rachel, because I never knew there was a patron saint of hurricanes.
Neither did I until I went to write this book, but names are super important to me. And so I went looking for, and I was like, the patron saint of storms isn't quite enough. Like, I need hurricanes. Yeah, so there was a fair amount of research for this book, and I usually say that I don't do like a lot of research in sort of an active way. It's more that I just really pay attention to things that I'm interested in, and eventually they show up in books. So I'm a big nonfiction reader, and I had read a book called A Furious Sky, which was about the history of hurricanes in America, and I just thought that was really interesting. So I already had a little bit of and I've lived through a hurricane. My husband's family have lived through multiple ones, including one of the famous sort of stories in their family is that in the 60s, his grandfather had a little piece of beachfront property back when you could buy that for a nickel and a Slurpee, and built his own beach shack back when men could do that with some wood and a hammer. And so he built his beach shack, and a hurricane came and just took it all out to sea, eventually, not a board left. And so when it came time to rebuild there, he was like, this time, every place it calls for 2 nails, I'm putting 6. Every time it says a 2x4, I'm putting a 4x4. And it was solid enough that my husband's grandmother moved in a bunch of antique furniture from her family's home in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And then another hurricane came, and not a stick left, not even the pilings it was on. And that story is quite legendary in my husband's family. They then went and bought a house much, much further inland. But I always thought, that's so interesting, the idea of, again, it's that when nature comes for you, it comes for you, and that's that. And man versus nature is always a classic theme. So I sort of had that going on, but I did have to spend a lot of time thinking about naming my hurricanes because, of course, hurricane naming is alphabetical. And having lived through hurricanes, having lost family in hurricanes, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was reference a real storm that had killed real people and possibly upset some, nobody's come into my book to get accidentally upset by something like that. I wanted to be sensitive to it. I also wanted to name all of the hurricanes after real killer women because obviously, but I didn't realize what a big task I had set for myself of the alphabet letters have to match up with the dates because you wouldn't have an A hurricane in August. That's too late in the season. But so things like that, and that was a challenge. But I don't know why I make things harder on myself. Than no one would have noticed that or cared. No, you're not gonna even see some of the names of the murderers. I've got Hurricane Audrey because that's my favorite Alabama criminal, and so nobody knows about her. So, but yeah, that's to make myself happy, basically.
Only you would have a favorite criminal.
She pretended to be her own twin, you guys. They made a movie about her. We're starring Judith Light. So she killed her husband, poisoned him, and tried to poison her kids just for money. And then she ran away, while out on bail, and she went and married a guy in New Hampshire. And then she was like, I've got to go down to Florida for cancer treatment. And he was like, okay. And so she just bailed. And then 2 months later called and was like, I'm that lady's twin sister. I'm going to come up and get her stuff. And just showed up blonde and 20 pounds lighter. And the guy was like, yeah, this seems real. And then she just moved in with him again. And then she ended up getting arrested because with her new look, she actually looked like a different lady criminal that was on the run for something. They fingerprinted her, found out, sent her back to Alabama, sent her to prison, where she then escaped and died in the woods of exposure on her escape. Do you know how hard it is to die of exposure in Alabama? Like, it's not easy. So that's the story of Audrey Marie Hilly, everyone.
Like I said, you can't make this stuff
Yeah,
up.
the best stuff you can't make up.
But one of the things you've had to make up, Jayne, is you've created a whole network among your books, and this book has ties to other books in the Jayneverse.
My Jayne verse, yeah. Yeah. I got to that point when I realized I keep going back to certain themes and certain elements that I love to play with. And instead of just trying to make every book look wildly different, I thought, duh. I'll just put it all in the Jayneverse. And then everybody will say, oh, she's writing in the Jayneverse. It's okay if she repeats that character or has somebody else come on stage that you've seen before. But it's really worked out well for me because I have this theory that all writers work within their own universes. And we go back to the places within that universe because that's where our real power lies. If we try to write something too different, we lose the power because we're not that fascinated with it. Yeah. You want to write something. You want to write the themes and emotions and conflicts that that compel you to write. And if you try to do something different that doesn't hold the same fascination, yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely find that to be the truth. And in fact, even in like my thrillers, there's always like cameos from people from the other books. Like they're really subtle, but yeah, it's because I like the idea that it is all kind of tied together somehow.
Yeah.
So it's like it's from your id, you know. So
We'll go back to Rachel. With your first adult book, you earned the sobriquet Queen of the Gothic. And that's not, it's easy to understand because your first book was basically your version of a classic.
yes, of Jane Eyre, yeah. And I love like the Gothic. I've always loved it. Ever since I was little, like one of the first like old movies my mom ever showed me was Rebecca. And it really made an impression on me. So yeah, I always just enjoy sort of playing with those ideas. And I get asked a lot, like, what does that mean? Like, what is a Gothic? And yes, I used to be an English teacher, but we don't have to get into the the weeds. And I could just say that for me, a huge part of the Gothic is that like setting needs to be a character. You really have to feel that place. And that's very important to me in my books. So whether it's the villa in the villa or the mansion in the Heiress or St. Medard's Bay, I just think that, Gothic is all about, it's also like a very Southern thing, even though I do not necessarily consider the book Southern Gothic, but it's that, you know, the past is never forgot or the past is never over, it's not even past sort of thing. So I always find that interesting, the way that secrets that we think, you know, we're done with, they're just going to keep coming up at some point.
Let's talk a little bit about pseudonyms, because both of you have written under different names. In your case, Jayne, you've said it's because you killed your career and had to keep reinventing yourself.
Yes, I've killed my career more than once. And one of the ways to resurrect a dead career is to start over again with a new name. So actually, Rachel and I were having this conversation just before we came up here. And my advice is, if you're thinking of using a second name, is stop, go back, save yourself, don't go there. It is really, really hard to build several brands. It's really hard to just build one brand, let alone a second brand. So my advice is, yes, not everybody's going to want to read a different kind of story from you, but I think it's safer than starting up fresh. But Rachel's also got opinions on this subject. So yeah.
In my case, like a pen name was semi-forced on me. So because when I sold the X-Hex, the first Aaron Sterling book, the Wife Upstairs had not come out yet. And so I didn't think like being like the Rachel Hawkins adult debut was that big of a deal, but like one of my publishers felt like they really wanted that. So that was fine. But I just said like, well, I'm going to have the second name, but like, I'm going to make it really obvious that it's me. Cause it was that exact thing. I was like, I'm not doing another Instagram account for it. I'm not doing it's, if you go, it's like Rachel Hawkins / Aaron Sterling on things. It's the same author photo even, because I just, and like the website takes you to the same places. So I just really, because of that, like I had already sort of built a brand in YA, although I will say that like similarly, I was able to keep the Rachel Hawkins name moving into adult, but my YA career was like very much on death's door when I did The Wife Upstairs. But I had learned from watching, I mean, I have always been a massive romance fan. As I was telling Jayne, the XX is in part dedicated to her as Amanda Quick, one of her pen names, because I was a massive fan of that, and still am, of those books. And so, but I learned like from romance novels, like, y'all can like really turn on a dime if you've got to. Like if something's not working, like it's like, okay, right now it's vampires. Cool, I'll do vampires for, that's not it. It's cowboys now. Okay, I'm going to do cowboys now. Like those were my examples as a kid.
Well, I think that's the reason for having a universe. You can figure out your core story, which is always the themes and the conflicts that you like to mess with. And then once you know those, you realize you can put it into any landscape. And that's what frees you as a writer. That's how I've been able to reinvent myself. And it sounds like that's what you went through, yeah.
Well, I think that you can change a lot of things as a writer. You can change your plots, your stories, your characters, your genres. But as a reader, I don't think you can change your voice because, Jayne, your voice is consistent across your universe. Rachel, I read Aaron Sterling. I read Rachel Hawkins. It's the same voice.
Yeah, and my agent actually says that's, you know, she's like, I can read 10 pages of something and be like, yeah, that's Rachel. Like, you know, and I think that's like a thing that is really important for authors. And sometimes people forget that, like, and voice is something you develop, but it's also something pretty innate in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree. It's very hard to, I always say it's sort of like an accent. You don't hear it, but everybody else does. It's just, and I think it pays to identify it early on and play to it, not try to homogenize it or weaken it.
Let's talk a little bit about your writing process because readers are fascinated how you create books. We'll start with you, Jayne, because your process is not terribly organized from what I remember.
You noticed. You know, I'm one of the more chaotic writers. I start out organized. It starts out looking efficient, like it's going to be all there, nailed down. My problem is that I don't get my really good ideas until I start the actual writing process, rather than up front when I'm doing the synopsis or the proposal, which is more like an outline. That to me seems to tap into a different side of my brain. And then when I get into the writing mode, I'm actually telling the story. The brain works a little differently, and that's when I get more excited about ideas that come out of nowhere, and then somehow I got to fit them in. So I end up with a lot of sticky notes on the computer, if you can imagine.
What does your process look like,
Yeah,
Rachel?
mine is also very chaotic. And the exact same thing. I always say that I'm like, it's not that I haven't been working on this. It's just that I didn't figure out the right way to do it until 2 weeks before it was due. Sometimes happens. And it's like not until you're sort of in the crucible do you sort of figure out, okay, like, because it is, I also like outline before I get started. Nothing like super formal, but I'm just sort of telling myself the story. And it all makes sense in that sort of like slightly 2D version of itself where it's just 10 pages of story. But once I get in there, same. And I don't write in order. I tend to, I have scenes that occur to me earlier. So I go ahead and write those. But sometimes by the time I get to those, I was like, okay, this doesn't quite work anymore. But I have to kind of get those first scenes out so that I'm kind of finding the voice a little bit, or I'm sort of figuring out. Also, too, like those early scenes that come to me, that's always kind of that's like, I know the nugget of like what I'm really interested in, you know? And so as long as I can kind of keep coming back to those core scenes, I know I'm going to be okay. But yeah, no, it's very chaotic. And I used to really beat myself up about that until I just realized like, no, that's just what it looks like.
That's your process. Yeah.
Exactly.
Did anything change in the book that you're with us today that surprised you? You were writing something and all of a sudden,
I mean, the storm went through many changes because I actually wrote this first in the summer of 2023. And you may have noticed I did not have a book come out in 2025. Well, that was because in the summer of 2023, I was working on the storm and I was like, it's just not working. And I emailed my editor in August, which was unfortunate because the book was due in August. And I was like, hey, it's not working. And she very kindly was like, cool, take until January and like we'll meet back. And I was like, okay, great. So I continued to sort of work on it. And then in January, I had to send another email and I said, no, it's just broken. And I was like, and it's not anything you can fix. It was not an editorial. Because sometimes you're like, I'm stuck on this plot point. I don't know if this makes sense. And an editor can fix that. But this was literally like, I am not having fun. I am straight up not having a good time right now. And that is not to say that writing is always fun, because I think you will agree that like it is not always fun. But it has to be fun some of the time. And I just felt like I was pulling teeth. And so, yeah, she was like, you can take a break. Like, let's just not do a 2025 book. And then you can do something else if you want to, or you can come back to this. And I chose, obviously, to come back to this. But, yeah, there was an incredibly different, there was no low, there was a hotel, but there had been like a cursed film that was being filmed there in the early 2000s. Like, it was just a very different book, and it wasn't very good, quite frankly. So,
Jayne, what about Shop on Hidden Lane? Anything change from your original concept?
Oh yeah, it really. If you saw the original outline, and you saw the finished book, it would look a lot different. It's just the way it works for me. The art colony was not there to begin with. The dog was. But what happened was I didn't set the setting right away, and it wasn't until I realized I wanted my setting to be in the Sedona area that the art colony came. One thing led to another. The art colony just felt right to go into that setting. And that's kind of how it works. You just sort of stumble into one thing and one thing after another. But I do think, in regard to whether or not writing is fun, I'm not sure it is not always fun. But I think what it does have to be most of the time is exciting.
yes, exactly.
It has to be a bit of an adrenaline rush. If you're not getting that, you're bored. And if you're bored, it's going to be bored on the page. And I think that's the biggest. I always tell people who say, have you ever had writer's block? And I've never had it in that way. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I've never experienced it that way. But I have sure as heck experienced author's boredom.
I would completely agree with that. I always say, like, there's something wrong with the book, or there's
I'm not
something wrong
excited.
with me. But it's like I just need a break from it usually.
Or I need to find some
figure
different
something else
yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Readers who are new to both of you as authors might not realize this just looking at your books, but both of you have kind of a wicked sense of humor that comes through in the writing. No, this to me doesn't say, ha ha, I'm funny, but no, that one doesn't. But that's an inherent part of your voice. Is that something that you come by naturally? Do you have to work at it? Either one of you?
For me, it's just there in the voice. Yeah.
Yeah, same. And I also feel like, because my books can get really dark, I feel like if you're making people laugh along the way, or like you're almost luring them in a little, like, and the more sort of familiar and grounded like a character feels, and usually that is by sort of being like chummy with the reader almost, the wilder places you'll follow them. So yeah.
Yeah, but I've also had it can be a double-edged sword too, because not everybody's going to get your sense of humor, and when that happens, you lose a reader. I mean, so in a sense, having a comic voice or a touch of humor in the book, you're depending on finding readers that can appreciate the same sense of humor, and not everybody does.
I will say this, Jayne, don't turn to the last page yet, but you have one of the best concluding paragraphs of your career. I read that and I just thought, oh my God, did she plan that in advance? It just is so perfect.
And that's an example of something that just fell into place right at the end of the book. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Don't read the last page first.
Now they're all looking at the back, yes. It was just such a nice surprise. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about you as writers, what you can tell other aspiring writers, because both of you have been in the business for a while. We won't say how many years. especially Jayne and I go back quite a long time. But both of you have said some things that I think are really perceptive. We'll start with you, Rachel. You said, with thrillers, I think the main thing to remember is that you can't surprise every reader. They're going to see some of the twists coming. Even if you can't surprise every reader, try to make sure you satisfy them.
Yes, exactly. And because like thriller readers especially, like y'all read everything, you know what I mean? Like that's one of the things I love so much about being in the thriller space is that I just feel like there's so much room for so many books. Like there's not, I mean, I loved my years in YA, but it really could get a little Hunger Games feeling sometimes. But in thrillers, it's like, no, because like we know that the readers are there for all of us, you know, and that's such a great feeling. And so, yeah, I'm just really aware of that like thriller readers read a lot and they're gonna figure out some of it. And that's okay because like you should figure out some of it. If I'm doing my job right, I'm laying down some breadcrumbs. So I always say that my sort of what I'm aiming for is that I want my readers to feel one step ahead of the characters and I'm trying to stay one step ahead of the readers. But yeah, that's kind of been my guiding light through all this.
I think what also makes your books great too is you don't forget it's not just the twist, you have to have the characters.
Right, exactly. And I say that like my books are never like a whodunit. They're a what the heck is going on? Why done it?
There's a couple good twists in there.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, exactly.
Care about those women.
Right. You want to know these people and you want to know what's the truth of the situation they're in more than you want to be like, wait, one of them's a twin? You know, or whatever. That's not a thing that happens in the book, I promise. One day though. So yeah, I think that's the thing. Twists have to sort of, they've got to be organic because if you're just sort of suddenly saying like that, like, oh, I didn't tell you they were all triplets and these were all different people. You know, you're like, okay, yeah, that surprised me because I had no way of seeing that coming, you know.
Jayne, I think one of the best things you've told aspiring writers is perseverance pays.
It does. But it probably pays in everything, John. It's like, stick to it. Like I've always said, a lot of my career was good fortune, good timing, but if I had not been in the right place at the right time and been there for 10 years. For example, the very first book I ever wrote that did not sell was a futuristic romance. It was 20 years before futuristic romances had a home. And I use that to say it is not always good to be ahead of the curve. It's not always just as being behind the curve isn't helpful. Being too far ahead is not necessarily helpful either. So you have to be smart about it. But I kept coming back to it, and eventually I found a place for it. Yeah, that story.
What scares you the most about publishing, especially nowadays?
AI.
Yeah, big time. You know, not that we're worried it's going to come for our jobs necessarily, like, because it can't do what we can do. But the ways in which people want it to come for our business people would absolutely love to just be able to churn something out and never have to deal with our difficult asses ever again. And I just think like there are so many things that like that technology or that robots can do for us, but like art to me is inherently uniquely human. It has to be that way. There's that's why we make art. And so yeah, that's the thing I worry about the most is AI slop, which like no one needs that.
Same.
Let's talk a little bit about you as readers, because you're not just authors and writers, you're readers. What are some of the books that have been kind of touchstones in your life? What are you reading now that you would suggest to other readers?
I have been on like a big, like lately, so I'll answer that part first. Lately has been a big nonfiction kick. I think because I've been working so much like on fiction, so my brain is just full of like fiction all the time. So I actually last year, the book that's really stayed with me, it was an essay collection, which sounds boring, but is not, by Skip Hollandsworth, who's a writer for Texas Monthly, who does just beautiful true crime writing. I enjoy true crime, but I try to be very thoughtful about how I consume it because I think it can be a little exploitative. And he's just not that. Again, I think he's been nominated or won a Pulitzer or something. But he had a book called She Kills, which, of course, I love. But it's a series of his collected essays from Texas Monthly that deals specifically with women criminals. And some of them women are murderers, some of them are not. Some of them are just like really touching stories. Like there used to be a all-girl band out of a prison in Texas in the 1930s, and like what happened to those women after they were like briefly radio stars in the 30s. And so I just really loved it, and I thought it was a very interesting look into a lot of different types of women and how women fall into crime and that kind of thing. So I loved that book. Books that have been a touchstone for me. This is such a dad book answer, but I love me some Ken Follett like so much. Like I grew up too with like Pillars of the Earth, and like I feel like I can go back to like Pillars of the Earth or A Dangerous Fortune, which is one no one ever talks about, but I love that book so much. And I think he's another one where like the stories are really big, but the reason that he's so good is because it's character and you care so much about those people. So yeah, those are big ones for me.
Jayne?
Well, the book that put me where I am today, the book that changed my life, aside from Nancy Drew, of course, but when I was a little older, in my teens, I discovered the first futuristic romantic suspense, maybe the very first ever, by Anne McCaffrey. And the book was called Restoree. And she at that time was writing contemporary romance, and she only wrote about 3. At least that's all I've ever been able to track down, because I think it didn't do much for her career. So she went off and invented dragons and the Pern stories and stuff. But before she did that dragons, she had a truly gothic version of romantic suspense on another planet, and it was kidnapped by aliens. It was everything. It was...
No, I'm going to track that down. That sounds really good.
I consider it a formative book for my career. Right now, what I'm really looking forward to, and I had a chance to get an ARC, so I've actually already read it, and I can highly recommend it, is the new book by Susan Elizabeth Phillips. And that comes out
In February. She's actually going to be here on Valentine's Day. So if you're in town, Susan Elizabeth Phillips will be here with And the Crowd Went Wild.
Yeah, it's another Chicago Stars book, if you're a Chicago Star. The team that has had more quarterbacks than any team in history.
We have to be careful to say that Susan did invent the sports romance, despite its current popularity. Take that, heated rivalry.
Yeah, she did. She pretty much invented the sports romance.
What's next for you if you want to tell us as an author?
So I have another trilogy coming out as Aaron Sterling in the Graves Glen series that will hopefully, if I finish, it's due on Monday. I was telling them, so hopefully if I go back to my hotel room and work really hard tonight, it will be finished and then it will come out in October. And then I'm also working on my next thriller right now, which is set in Belize, so we're kind of, I've done like 2 books back to back set in the contemporary South. So now it's time to go on vacation again. And so, yeah, it's Belize. It's all sorts of things happening in the jungle. So it's a lot of fun.
Jayne?
My next book out will be, I think, late May, early June.
Jayne Castle, yeah.
Will be a Jayne Castle. Yeah, that's one of my futuristic romances, romantic suspense with dust bunnies. No dogs, but dust bunnies.
Before we turn it over to the audience for any questions, I do have one last question for Rachel. Is it true that you hold the record in your state for the most Barbie Ferrari cliff dive crashes?
Yes, I'm sure that I do. That is, I always say that I was a writer before I could even write, because I played Barbie in a way that like no one else was really like I didn't even like my friends to play Barbies with me because nobody was stepping to my level, quite frankly. And so yes, I staged many a Barbie Ferrari crash down my stairs. To the point where my mom was like, okay, so like enough of that, because it's like smacking down on the parquet floor and it's really loud. So yes, I no one had more like staged accidents. That was the thing. Barbie was always like offing Ken and like, oh no, he was drunk and he drove off a cliff.
Then she collected the insurance.
And she collected that's how I had multiple dream houses. So, you know.
Do we have any questions from the audience for Jayne or Rachel? Towards the back.
I don't know.
It's funny. I technically do. Like, I have them in the outline, but they can change. Like, so I think I do until I actually get there, and then it's like, oh wait, no, it's actually this. So yeah.
Yeah, it's the same with me.
Other questions?
Jayne, we haven't seen any Amanda Quick for a while. I know you kind of put the 1930s on the back burner, but anything on that coming up at all?
I don't have anything in the hopper on right now for the Amanda Quick. I'm kind of looking around to see. It's for me and for my readers, it's really firmly identified with some historical setting. You know, like it was the 19th century, first half, and then the second half, and then the 1930s. And I haven't really found another historical setting that pulls me the same way those two periods did. So never say never, though, in this business. If I ever have to reinvent myself, that's...
You were putting out about 3 books a year. I don't know how you did it, so now it's gone to 2 a year. So
Yeah.
Is that kind of where you're staying at?
Yeah, 2 years is 2 a year is just perfect for me. It fits my schedule. If I'm not writing, I get twitchy. So you don't want to see that going on for months on end.
Any other questions?
I have one. Why don't you have a southern accent?
I know. There is no reason for it. Like, literally, I have lived in Alabama since I was 18 months old. My whole family has been in Alabama for like 5 generations. But my parents did not have super strong Southern accents. But my dad was in the Navy. And I think like they traveled around enough like in their 20s that they kind of ditched it. And then I just didn't get it. My husband has a really thick, everyone else in my family other than my mom and me sound very Southern. My husband sounds incredibly Southern, but no, it comes out in certain words or if I've been drinking or if I'm very angry. I did one time like look out the window and my son and his friends had found like a hatchet and they were like trying to chop down a tree and they were like 8. And I heard myself be like, have y'all lost your goddamn minds? And I was like, oh, what was that? Like, where did that came from somewhere inside. So it can happen.
Any last questions? Yep. this thing.
The next book is Enter the Nightmare. Yeah, it's my gothic on harmony. And I meant to say back when we were talking about the gothic, I really do consider it the foundational book of women's fiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got it all, you know. It's got that trapped in the house, who can you trust, and there's no one to call for help, and am I going mad? And what woman has not worried about any of those 3 things?
Okay.
Hi, guys. I thought I'd come see you before I disappear for 47 days. I'm not dying. I'm going on a trip that was supposed to be in 2020, but COVID killed it. So it's my 85th birthday trip instead of my 80th birthday trip. So I'm really excited about it. But my husband has been working on a project because we have years and years and years of video and audio. And we now have a new search feature, which is not yet perfect. On our website where you can go to click on podcast. There's now one where you can click on video on podcast and put in an author's name, and all of the things that we have for them are going to be there. It's not perfect yet. Sometimes it doesn't track. You know, there'll be an audio and not a video or not. But the point is that you can put in Jayne Ann Krentz and you can see a lot of programs that we have done. You know, which, I think it's an absolutely wonderful feature, and I urge you to give it a shot. I'm really surprised at the size of the audience that we have for all of that. And a lot of it is now libraries and book clubs that use this conversation, because neither Jayne nor Rachel is likely to show up in where they are. But you guys are a really important part of that. It's much more interesting for people to watch a live event here in the store where you're participating than to watch another Zoom event. So I really appreciate the fact that you all come out to support that. Now, what were we talking about before I got up here? Because at my age, I have these Gothic. That was it. Okay. Jayne Ann and I and JT Ellison did, what did we do? Like 3 or 4 conversations during COVID, and it was all about the Gothic. They asked me what was going to be the next big thing in like 2020, and I said it was going to be the Gothic. I was right. And then we had these great conversations about it. So if you use that search function, you may be able to run down Jayne and JT and me talking about the Gothic and how foundational it actually is. So I was kind of on track, wasn't I? I just kind of went sideways there for a moment. I know that John has put out some absolutely amazing food. I walked back into the back room and the chocolate just was like a wave coming over me. But I also wanted to encourage you to come to our Valentine's party because it is Susan Elizabeth Phillips, but it's also a new author who has written a locked airplane mystery. And when I read it, I was telling Jayne last night, I think it was Jayne, or maybe it was Dana Stappenow this morning, she's house sitting while we're on, that it reminds me of the story of Captain Sully, who, remember, landed his plane in the Hudson, and then all the grief he got, was it really, whatever. Well, there is a part of this book that is like that, and it just, I could see the movie all over again when I was reading that chapter. But it's a really fascinating book. Has a terrible title. It's called Murder at 30,000 Feet. Yawn. I didn't read it in time to suggest that there should be a different title. But anyway, the 2 authors are going to be here on Valentine's Day at 4 o'clock, and we urge you to come and bring Valentine's to give to everybody else. Remember when you were in grade school and there was always somebody who didn't get a Valentine and it was terrible? So we don't want to do that. We're gonna figure that out. And John will be our host, so it'll be great. And my final question is: are you going to come back in May or June, or do we know yet?
I would love to.
All right, we'll try to work it out. It's wonderful to have Jayne here. She's so kind about coming down from Seattle, and
It's a pleasure. I love Arizona.
yeah. So anyway, over to you.
I think we're about ready to wrap up. So if we want to thank our authors again for being here, thank you in the audience.
Thank
and
you
thank
guys
our
so
virtual
much.
audience.
Thank you.
If you give us a few minutes, we'll get the authors situated to sign your books up. You have numbered tickets for the signing. As you stand up, fold up your chairs, put them over on the side with the camera. We'll get them out of the way. Thank you.